Hi there, this is Thomas Newman, the founder of Viva Financial Tuition.
I'm Hugo Newman, the co-founder of Viva Financial Tuition.
And in today's video, what we want to do is discuss one of the most common mistakes that students make when studying. And we're going to suggest an alternative that is far more effective. So one of the most common mistakes students make when they approach a daunting subject such as the ones you will cover at CMA, is to underline things as they go through a particular chapter of a textbook. The science of learning demonstrates that is actually a very suboptimal way to retain information. And why that is because it creates the illusion of knowing. You believe that by underlining key terms as you go along, that you're actually going to retain them later on. We all know someone who takes out the highlighter and proceeds to highlight probably 80% of the text. And what you're telling your brain in that matter is that all of the information you're covering is of equivalent value. And of course, that is not the case. Some pieces of information are absolutely crucial. They are principles that you need to hold on to, while other examples and pieces of information can be largely discarded, and it's not such a big deal if you actually forget about them. What you want to retain are the underlying principles and some key examples. So, if highlighting is actually quite ineffective when you come to study, what can you do instead?
Well, the science of learning actually demonstrates that one of the most effective ways of retaining information in long-term memory is through what's called retrieval practice and self-testing. This is basically the idea that after you've finished reading through something, hopefully in a concentrated way, you close your book or you stop watching your video and you try to explain the main points and principles that you've just learned in your own words, not using jargon or relying on technical terms, but unpacking them in your own words, in your own language. So there's no problem really with underlining some key terms, the occasional key term or important principle, or highlighting it. Nothing wrong with that. But the main way of retaining information for the long term is through this retrieval practice and self-testing methodology.
So one of the ways that I actually do this myself, I always have a book on the go. Often it will relate to the science of learning or some such topic that is relevant to Viva Financial Tuition. So I'll read a chapter, and while the temptation is actually to just move on to the next chapter and hurtle through the book at a quick pace, if you want to actually hold on to something and burn it into your long-term memory, you need to work. You need to be an active learner, not a passive learner. And highlighting is an example of passive learning. It's too easy to become a little bit distracted with it and just not be able to sort through the most important information versus the superfluous stuff. But an active learner makes it a little bit uncomfortable for himself or herself. So what do? I close my book. I could be on the metro or a bus or just walking down the street or whatever it is. And I will actually replay in my own mind what I believe to be the structure of the chapter I just read, the most important points. I'll start to play a little bit with those ideas. It only takes about 5 minutes to sum up what I've just read. Often you will know that I'll arrive to work, we'll go out for a coffee or something like that, and I'll actually explain to Hugo what I've been reading. And the act of putting what I have just learned into my own words tests my own knowledge of the subject. And it's a great way to retain what you've just learned.
Another thing that this does is it actually exposes when you haven't really understood something. This idea of explaining something in your own terms, it really does challenge you to fully and deeply understand what it is that you've just been reading. So there's no getting away with it if you have to do it in your own terms and not simply lean on some of the jargon and technical language. One of the things that I like to do is sometimes if I'm learning at home, for example, if I'm reading or studying something, what I like to do is at the end of the chapter or the section, close the book and then just pretend that I'm actually teaching or leading a class. So I imagine myself in front maybe of a small group, if you don't like to imagine yourself in front of a large group, and simply pretend that you're actually teaching and imparting this information to them. You really want to get them to understand in the most efficient way possible, but really you want to get it into their long-term memory. So you think to yourself, how am I going to explain this in a way that they're going to actually retain this? You can think of, for example, using useful examples. You can use illustrations and so on and so forth. And that's a good way, again, of really demonstrating your understanding and demonstrating it to yourself as much as to your imagined students that you really do understand this content.
You must have very tolerant neighbours.
Yes, I do.
So there you have it. We've demonstrated one particular myth when it comes to effective learning and a better approach, a more effective approach to retaining information in the long term.